Rain strikes the concrete ledge with the steady rhythm of a metronome, tracking your heartbeat. You crouch in the shadows of the adjacent high-rise, watching the target building across the street. Water drips from the edge of your carbon fiber mask onto the saturated fabric of your suit. The ambient temperature hovers near freezing, but your thermal regulates your core heat perfectly. Below you, the neon signs of the city bleed into the puddles like scattered paint. Sirens wail in the distance, providing a baseline hum to the urban symphony surrounding you. You exhale slowly, letting the breath dissipate against the integrated filters of your facepiece. Tonight, you operate as a ghost entirely detached from the world of the living. Your objective rests 30 floors up behind layers of corporate security and armed private military contractors. This operation requires absolute precision because a single error equates to your immediate and violent termination. You review the architectural blueprints downloaded into your retinal display, noting the primary structural vulnerabilities. The target controls a vast network of illicit arms deals hidden behind a legitimate pharmaceutical front. He believes his wealth buys him immunity from the consequences of his ruthless business decisions. You are here to correct that misconception with extreme prejudice and surgical lethality. A digital timer blinks in the corner of your vision, counting down to the exact infiltration window. You flex your fingers, testing the tension in your reinforced gloves before making your first move. The grappling line launches from your wrist gauntlet with a suppressed pneumatic hiss piercing the wind. The titanium hook bites deep into the masonry of the opposing structure with a solid thud. You step off the ledge, surrendering yourself to gravity for one terrifying and exhilarating second. The line goes taut, ripping you through the night air across the dizzying concrete canyon. Wind roars past your ears, trying to tear you loose from your solitary lifeline. You tuck your body into an aerodynamic shape, maximizing your momentum toward the glass facade. Your boots impact the reinforced window frame, absorbing the kinetic energy through specialized shock dampeners. You hang suspended above the city streets, clinging to the sheer vertical face of the skyscraper. The synthetic muscle fibers in your suit engage, assisting your natural strength as you begin the climb. Every handhold must be calculated because the slick surface offers zero margin for structural failure. The scent of ozone and wet dust rises from the urban canyon, fueling your adrenaline. You ascend past rows of illuminated offices filled with late-night workers, oblivious to your presence. You move like a spider, scaling a web of steel and glass toward the upper echelon. The physical toll builds in your shoulders, but years of brutal conditioning suppress the pain entirely. You reach the maintenance level where the building ventilation system expels heated air into the storm. The thermal exhaust creates a localized distortion field, masking your heat signature from perimeter sensors. You unholster a laser cutter, adjusting the focal length to slice through the heavy steel grating. The intense beam melts the metal with a blinding flash and the sharp stench of vaporized iron. You catch the heavy grate before it falls, easing it silently onto the adjacent catwalk. Sliding feet first into the narrow ductwork requires you to contort your shoulders and hips uncomfortably. Darkness swallows you whole, forcing you to rely entirely on your tactile senses and auditory perception. The ambient hum of massive industrial fans vibrates through the thin metal pressing against your ribs. A dust coats the inside of the shaft, smelling faintly of machine oil and stagnant recirculated air. You crawl forward inch by inch, mapping the labyrinthine pathways in your mind. Navigation demands patience because rushing through confined spaces leads to noise and inevitable detection. You pause at every junction, cross-referencing your internal compass with the stolen schematics. A slight change in air pressure alerts you to an upcoming drop into the primary server corridor. You peer through the final vent cover, observing two armed guards patrolling the polished marble floor. Their tactical gear indicates high-tier military training rather than standard corporate security protocols. They carry suppressed submachine guns and wear biometric monitors that broadcast their vitals to a central hub. Eliminating them directly would trigger an immediate lockdown when their heart rates drop to zero. You must bypass them entirely, slipping through the gaps in their overlapping fields of vision. You wait for the precise moment their patrol paths diverge, creating a momentary blind spot. The vent cover yields to your quiet manipulations, swinging open on well-oiled hinges. You drop gracefully to the floor, absorbing the impact with bent knees and silent footfalls. The temperature in the server room drops significantly to keep the massive databanks cool. Rows of humming mainframes create a labyrinth of blinking lights and tangled fiber optic cables. You move fluidly between the racks, mirroring the shadows cast by the flickering indicator lamps. One guard turns down your aisle, his boots clicking rhythmically against the pristine white tiles. You press your back against the cold metal casing, controlling your breathing to remain undetected. The scent of cheap synthetic tobacco wafts from his uniform as he walks past your hiding spot. He passes within mere inches, entirely unaware that death stands quietly in his peripheral vision. You wait until his footsteps fade around the corner before advancing toward the executive elevator bank. Bypassing the biometric scanner requires a specialized decryption module wired directly into the panel. You connect the interface cable, watching the progress bar fill as the device attacks the encryption. The lock mechanism clunks heavily, disengaging the primary bolts securing the reinforced doors. You slide inside the empty car, overriding the destination controls to access the penthouse level directly. Upward momentum presses you into the floor as the high-speed elevator accelerates toward the summit. Tension coils in your muscles because the doors will open directly into the hostile zone. You draw your primary weapon, a monomolecular blade forged from carbon steel and modern composites. The weapon feels perfectly balanced, resting in your palm like a natural extension of your arm. The elevator chimes softly, signaling your arrival at the final layer of the corporate fortress. You shift your weight to the balls of your feet, preparing for immediate kinetic action. The steel doors slide apart, revealing an expansive foyer, decorated with priceless art and armed sentries. 4 guards occupy the space, positioned strategically to cover all potential angles of approach. Action must be immediate and decisive, leaving them no time to process the threat or sound alarms. You burst from the elevator, moving faster than their human reflexes can accurately track. Your blade arcs silently through the air, severing the neural spine of the closest threat. He collapses like a discarded puppet, his weapon clattering harmlessly against a thick Persian rug. The second guard raises his rifle, but you pivot, driving the pommel of your sword into his throat. Now, crushed cartilage suffocates his warning shout before it ever escapes his lips. You sweep the legs of the third guard, driving a secondary throwing knife into his chest as he falls. The final sentry fumbles for his radio, his eyes wide with a sudden visceral panic. You cross the distance in 2 massive strides, burying your blade deep into his sternum. Blood pools on the pristine floor, smelling sharply of copper and sudden, violent trauma. You wipe the crimson residue from your weapon, flicking the moisture away with a practiced snap. The silence returns to the room, heavier now, and saturated with the reality of sudden death. You step over the bodies, moving toward the carved oak doors of the inner sanctum. The handle turns easily, indicating the target feels entirely secure behind his layers of dead men. You push the door open, entering a room dominated by floor-to-ceiling windows and leather furniture. The target sits behind a massive mahogany desk, nursing a glass of expensive amber liquid. He looks up from his terminal, irritation flashing across his face, before realization sets in. He sees the blood on your armor and understands the grim finality of your presence. He reaches frantically for a hidden drawer, but his movements are sluggish and predictable. You cross the room with terrifying speed, pinning his hand to the desk with a vicious strike. He screams in sudden agony, the sound echoing sharply against the reinforced glass windows. You look into his eyes, seeing the desperate bargaining of a man who suddenly understands mortality. He offers money, power, and influence, attempting to purchase his life from an empty ledger. You remain silent because your contract permits no negotiation, and your discipline allows no mercy. The blade moves with practiced efficiency, finding the carotid artery with surgical precision. The cut is clean, deep, and immediately fatal, ending his reign of influence in seconds. He slumps forward onto his terminal, his expensive suit ruined by the sudden arterial spray. The operation is complete, but survival requires immediate extraction before the biometric alarms trigger a response. You turn away from the corpse, prioritizing the egress route over the spectacle of death. You approach the expansive windows, looking down at the tiny vehicles crawling through the wet streets. The storm outside has intensified, lashing the glass with heavy sheets of freezing rain. You draw a localized explosive charge, pressing the adhesive backing against the reinforced pane. The detonator arms with a sharp beep, echoing loudly in the suddenly quiet office. You step back, shielding your face as the shaped charge shatters the glass outward into the night. Cold wind violently invades the room, scattering loose papers and knocking over expensive decorations. You step onto the precipice, looking down into the yawning abyss of the concrete canyon. Sirens erupt from the building perimeter, indicating the discovery of your handiwork in the foyer. The hunt has begun, but you belong to the shadows, and the shadows offer escape. You dive forward into the storm, deploying your specialized glide suit to catch the turbulent updrafts. You fall through the darkness, feeling the raw power of the wind rushing against your body. The city lights streak past your vision, blurring into a continuous ribbon of electric color. You adjust your trajectory, steering toward the industrial district where the rooftops cluster closely together. The fabric of your suit snaps loudly under the immense aerodynamic pressure of your descent. You spot your designated extraction point, a dark alleyway behind an abandoned manufacturing plant. You deploy your secondary drogue chute, violently decelerating your momentum right before impact. Your boots hit the wet pavement hard, forcing you into a tight roll to bleed off the remaining speed. You rise smoothly, checking your surroundings for any signs of pursuit or unwanted observation. The alley remains deserted, smelling strongly of wet garbage and rotting brickwork. You strip off the tactical harness, stowing the specialized gear in a hidden secure cache. You step out onto the main street, blending seamlessly with the late-night pedestrian traffic. The rain continues to fall, washing the remaining traces of tension from your weary muscles. You pull up the collar of your civilian jacket, disappearing into the anonymous flow of humanity. You are no longer the apex predator, but just another exhausted soul navigating the urban sprawl. The transition requires a severe mental shift, compartmentalizing the violence away from your public persona. You walk past a police cruiser, its lights flashing brilliantly against the slick black asphalt. The officers inside remain oblivious to the instrument of death passing mere feet from their window. This ignorance protects them, but it also highlights the vast divide between their world and yours. You exist in the negative space, the dark corners where conventional rules cease to apply. The life of an assassin strips away normalcy, replacing it with a cold, calculated pragmatism. Every interaction becomes a tactical assessment, every environment a potential battlefield or escape route. You sacrifice human connection for the sake of operational security and personal survival. The phantom weight of the blade remains in your hand, even when your pockets are empty. You reach your safe house, a nondescript apartment in a decaying sector of the sprawling metropolis. Multiple deadbolts lock behind you, sealing out the chaotic noise of the sprawling city. You stand in the dark, listening to the rhythmic drumming of rain against the cheap glass. The adrenaline finally fades, leaving a profound physical exhaustion settling deep into your bones. You clean your weapon, meticulously removing every microscopic trace of the recent kinetic engagement. The steel gleams perfectly, catching the pale light filtering through the dirty window blinds. The contract is closed, the balance restored, and the shadows wait patiently for your next descent.